The desert was quiet. Hot wind blew across the golden dunes and the sun sat high in the sky, bright and unforgiving. Jalen, a human trader, walked slowly beside his camel caravan. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked ahead. His camels carried spices, cloth, and dry fruit across the desert from one outpost to another. He had done this journey many times, but this time, something felt different. His lead camel stopped suddenly. It let out a soft grunt and turned its head to the left, toward a small dune. "What is it, girl?" Jalen asked, patting its neck. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the dune. That's when he saw it. Two large eyes. Someone was watching him. The figure was small, almost hidden behind the sand. At first, Jalen thought it might be a desert child. But then he noticed the skin. It wasn't brown like the desert tribes. It was light blue, and the eyes were too big, too round. The ears were sharp at the tips. Not human. Jalen took one step forward. The creature flinched. "It's okay," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you." The small figure didn't move, just stared, silent, still, eyes wide like a frightened animal. She was a girl, maybe 10 or 11 by human standards. Thin, barefoot, dressed in a torn brown cloth that barely covered her knees. Her hair was silver and messy, falling over her face. She wasn't speaking, just watching. Then, she ran. She turned and disappeared, behind the dune, moving fast, her small feet kicking up sand. "Wait!" Jalen shouted, running a few steps after her. But it was too late. She was gone. He stood there, breathing hard, confused. Who was she? Where did she come from? There were no alien settlements nearby, no crash sites, nothing. "Strange," he whispered. "Very strange." Jalen walked back to his camels, but his mind stayed on the girl. Her eyes were not just afraid. They were full of something else. Wonder. Like she had never seen a camel before, like they were something magical. That night, Jalen set up camp near a rocky cliff. His camels lay down in a circle, forming a warm shield around the fire. He cooked a small meal, dried meat, flatbread, and dates. He placed some of it on a clean plate and quietly set it down away from the fire near the edge of camp. Then he pretended not to look. Hours passed. The stars appeared in the sky. His fire burned low. Suddenly, one of the camels made a soft noise. Jalen didn't move. He listened. Crunch. A soft footstep in the sand. Then another. Jalen turned his head slightly, but saw nothing. In the morning, the food plate was empty, and the camel blanket was missing. He smiled. "She came back," he whispered. For the next 2 days, he left out food and water at the same spot. Each time it disappeared during the night. Once he found small footprints near the rocks, but he never saw her again. Not yet. Then, on the 4th night, it changed. Jalen woke up before dawn. Something felt off. He sat up slowly, listening. There, a soft sound, a breath. He looked toward the camels. Under the belly of the biggest camel, half hidden in the sand, curled up with the missing blanket around her shoulders, was the girl. She was asleep. Jalen didn't move. He just watched her. Her skin was dusty. Her arms were skinny. Her knees had small cuts. But her face was peaceful. For the first time, he saw her without fear. And the camel, his best, most loyal camel, was standing guard over her like she was part of the herd. Jalen slowly got up and walked closer. The camel didn't protest. The girl opened her eyes. She froze. "It's okay," Jalen said softly. "You're safe." She sat up quickly, ready to run. Jalen held out a date. "Hungry?" She looked at it, unsure. He set it on the ground and stepped back. After a few seconds, she reached forward and took it. She bit into it. Her eyes widened. Then something unexpected happened. She cried. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks as she finished the fruit. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve but didn't speak. "My name is Jalen," he said. She stared at him. Then, with a tiny voice, she whispered, "Sira." The next morning, the desert sun rose slowly, lighting up the sand in soft gold. But Jalen wasn't watching the sunrise. He was watching the little alien girl, Sira. She sat quietly near the fire, wrapped in the camel blanket like it was her only treasure. Her silver hair hung in knots around her face. Her skin, a soft light blue, looked thinner in the sunlight. Her hands trembled as she reached for the bowl he offered. She looked at the food with wide, cautious eyes. Dates, flatbread, a boiled egg, a warm drink. Jalen said nothing. He just waited. Then, like someone who hadn't eaten in weeks, she began to eat. Not fast, not like an animal, but like someone afraid the food might vanish any second. She held each piece like it was special. Chewed slowly, eyes closing at every bite like it brought back something she had lost. She's starving, Jalen thought, heart heavy. How long has she been out there? He broke a piece of bread, dipped it in honey, and handed it to her. Sira took it gently, almost with care. She licked a corner of the honey. Her mouth quivered. Then she bit it. And for the second time, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't cry like before. No sobs. No sound. Just silent tears sliding down her cheeks. Jalen looked away, giving her the dignity she deserved. He didn't ask questions yet. Not while she was still surviving, still rebuilding her strength. He simply sat beside her. Quiet. Present. As the day passed, Sira didn't leave. She stayed near the camels, watching them with soft curiosity. She followed their slow steps, touched their thick coats, and whispered strange words in a language Jalen didn't understand. The camels didn't mind. In fact, they seemed calmer around her. One of them, a grumpy old male named Rock, actually let her touch his nose, something he never let Jalen do. Jalen raised an eyebrow. Well, she's got some kind of magic. Later, while Jalen loaded supplies, he noticed Sira drawing in the sand with her fingers. Shapes. Symbols. Then, pictures. One drawing showed tall ships, pointed and sharp, hovering in the sky. Another showed what looked like fire raining down from above. The next image was harder to look at. A girl running, chased by figures with helmets and weapons. Behind her, a village burned. And finally, camels. Walking calmly under the stars. Sira didn't say anything. She just drew. Jalen sat beside her and gently asked, This happened to you?" She nodded slowly. "Your village?" he asked. She touched the fire. "Your people?" She touched the ships. Then she looked at the camels. Her hand paused. She touched her chest and whispered, "Safe." That night, Sira stayed closer to the fire. Jalen gave her a soft mat to sleep on, but she chose to curl up near the camels again. Their warmth seemed to comfort her more than anything else. Before sleeping, she looked up at the stars and whispered something in her alien tongue. Jalen listened carefully. It sounded like a prayer. He didn't understand the words, but the sadness in her voice. It pierced his heart. He remembered what it felt like to lose someone, to be far from home, alone. He looked at her small figure in the sand, and he made a silent promise. "I won't let anyone hurt you again." In the morning, Jalen woke to a sound he hadn't heard in years. Laughter, soft, fragile, but real. He turned and saw Sira sitting with the youngest camel, Mina, who was nosing through the food pouch. Sira was giggling as Mina tried to eat a date from her hand but kept missing. Jalen didn't move. He just watched. That sound, so simple, so human, was worth more than any treasure. He smiled to himself and said quietly, "She's not just surviving now. She's beginning to live again." Jalen had seen war survivors before. He had seen fear, pain, and silence. but never like this. Sira did not scream. She did not shake. She did not speak much either. But her eyes, they always spoke. She watched everything. The camels, the fire, the stars, and him. She would sit still for hours, drawing lines in the sand, watching the sun rise and fall, whispering words in her own language that he didn't understand but somehow felt like poetry. One evening, as orange twilight painted the dunes, Jalen tried again. He sat beside her and held up a cup. "Water," he said clearly. Then he pointed at her cup. "Water." Sira blinked, then nodded. He picked up a date. "Date," he said. She looked at it, then at him. "Dat?" she tried. He smiled. "Yes, close enough." She touched the sand. Son?" Jalen chuckled. "Sand. That's good." She tilted her head, thoughtful. Then she reached over and placed her small hand gently on his chest. "Human," she said softly. Jalen looked at her in surprise. Then she touched her own chest, "Sirah," and smiled. They began sharing words every night. He taught her things: sky, camel, fire, blanket, sweet. She repeated them carefully, storing them in her mind. But there were still so many things she didn't say, things that lived deep in her memory. One afternoon she pointed to the saddle on a camel and said, "Tren?" "Tren?" Jalen repeated. "That's what your people call it?" She nodded, then paused. Her eyes clouded. Jalen asked gently, "Did you ride camels before?" She looked away. Then slowly she drew again in the sand, a younger version of her, riding between tall banners. Alien warriors around her, a desert full of strange beasts. Camels too, but not earth camels. Bigger, wilder, but similar. And then smoke, fire, falling, alone. She drew herself curled in a broken escape pod. Jalen stared at the pictures in silence. "You were royalty," he whispered. "Weren't you?" Sira didn't answer, but her silence was loud. Later that night, Jalen wrote in his journal. It was a habit he picked up during years of lonely travel. He wrote, "She learns fast. She listens more than most adults I've known. But there's something deeper, something ancient in her blood. She's not just an alien child, she's something more." Suddenly the camels outside grunted. Jalen looked up. Sira wasn't in her mat. He grabbed a lantern and stepped into the night. He followed the camel tracks until he reached the far dune, where Sira sat alone, cross-legged, facing the stars. She was singing, but it wasn't a normal song. It was haunting, soft tones, rising and falling like waves. No words, just sounds. Strange, echo-like notes that made the air feel heavy. The camels stood nearby, silent, calm, eyes half closed like they were in a trance. Jalen watched in awe. It was beautiful, otherworldly. He didn't speak. He just listened. And when Sira stopped, she turned and saw him. Her expression didn't change. She just said one word: memory. The next morning, something changed. Sira brought him something from her small satchel, a tiny metal cube covered in alien symbols. She placed it in his hand. "Record," she said. Jalen turned it over. "Your past?" Sira nodded. "My father. Voice. My mother. Songs." He looked at her. "You want me to keep it?" She nodded again. "Why?" Sira smiled softly and said, "So, I don't disappear." Later, while packing supplies, Jalen noticed something strange. The camels, who usually followed his lead, were now following her. Wherever she walked, they walked. Wherever she sat, they circled her. She didn't command them. She didn't use force. She just understood them, and they obeyed. Jalen thought deeply that night. This girl doesn't just speak with words. She speaks with silence, with song, with spirit. Her voice isn't in her mouth. It's in her presence. And somehow, he knew. Her. Silence was more powerful than any scream. The desert cooled under a sky full of stars. The fire cracked softly. The camels slept, legs folded beneath them. Jalen rested on his blanket with his arms behind his head, looking up at the quiet sky. Everything looked peaceful. But he heard it again, a sound too soft for the wind, too painful to be ignored. Crying, not loud, not broken. Just slow, careful sobs like someone trying not to be heard. He turned his head toward the camels, and there she was. Sira. She sat alone behind the largest camel, knees pulled to her chest, silver hair covering her face. She rocked slightly, back and forth like a child lost in memory. Jalen didn't speak. Instead, he slowly walked over and sat a few steps behind her. He didn't ask, "What's wrong?" He didn't say, "Don't cry." He knew better. Some pain was too deep for words. He waited. Sira wiped her eyes, but her shoulders kept shaking. Finally, she whispered, "I hear them when I sleep." Jalen didn't understand. She continued, voice breaking. The screaming. The fire. I remember my mother holding me tight. She sang while the pod closed. She told me to live. Jalen's heart ached. Your pod crashed here? She nodded. I was the only one who made it. Jalen didn't know what to say, so he reached into his coat, pulled out his old music device, and turned it on. A soft, earth melody filled the air, a slow, warm tune. Sira looked up, curious. This helps me, Jalen said. When I miss home, Sira listened. Her eyes softened. Then she hummed. The sound surprised him. It wasn't the alien song she sang before. It was hers, mixed with the human melody. Her voice rose and fell gently, floating into the stars. And that night, her tears stopped. The next morning, Jalen found something near the fire, a small stone, polished, glowing faintly blue. It wasn't from Earth. Sira walked over and placed her hand on it. My mother wore it, she said softly. It keeps heat when you hold it. I want you to have it. Jalen shook his head. No, Sira, that's yours, but she placed it in his palm and closed his fingers over it. You keep it, she whispered. Now you're warm to me. As they traveled that day, Jalen noticed she was different. Not weak, not scared, just quiet, watchful, but not lost anymore. He let her walk beside the lead camel. She whispered to it in her strange tongue, and the camel made a soft, happy sound in return. Later, Jalen asked, How do you talk to them? Sira smiled. I don't talk. I listen. That evening, they stopped by a dry riverbed. Jalen prepared the food, but before he could call her, Sira brought him a pouch of spices from his own supplies and mixed them into the stew. It tasted better than anything he'd made in years. He laughed. You've been watching me too closely, Sira replied in her slow, careful English. You cook, but your camels lie when they eat your food. Jalen choked on his drink and burst out laughing. For the first time, Sira laughed too. It was small, bright, real, and for the first time her eyes didn't hide sorrow. They showed hope. That night, as they lay by the fire again, Sira whispered, I don't want to go back to the stars. Jalen looked at her. You don't have to. She looked up at him, searching his face. Really? Yes, Jalen said firmly. You're safe here, I promise. Sira laid her head on the blanket. For the first time in many nights, she fell asleep without crying, and Jalen didn't write in his journal that night. He just watched the stars, thinking, sometimes the most broken hearts just need someone to stay. The wind changed. It wasn't the kind of wind that brings a sandstorm. It was colder, strange. Even the camels felt it. They lifted their heads, sniffed the air, and shifted uneasily. Jalen felt it too. Something was wrong. Sierra was feeding Mina, the youngest camel, when she stopped moving. Her eyes turned toward the sky, then she whispered one word, "Them." Jalen looked up. Far above, slicing through the blue sky, was a silver dot. Small at first, but fast. A ship, not a trade vessel, not local, military, alien. His heart sank. He quickly packed the camp. "Sierra," he said firmly, "stay close." She didn't speak, but she followed, eyes wide, body tense. The ship didn't land right away. It circled, scanned, then disappeared over the dunes. But they both knew it would return. That night they didn't light a fire. They camped near a dry cave, deep in the rocks. The camels huddled close, silent. Sierra barely touched her food. Jalen watched the dark sky hand near his old plasma rifle. He hadn't used it in years, but tonight it was ready. The next morning it happened. A loud humming sound filled the air. The wind kicked up, the camels cried out. Dust flew everywhere. A sleek, sharp-edged alien ship landed just 50 steps from their camp. The door hissed open. 3 armored figures stepped out, tall, cold, weapons in hand. One of them raised a scanner, pointed it at the camp, and nodded. Target located. Jalen stood between them and the camels. He didn't hold his gun. Not yet. One of the officers spoke in broken human language. "We come for the escaped one. Alien girl." Jalen's jaw tightened. "She's a child. She's classified property, under Section Delta 47. Missing from crash, we recover now." "She's not property," Jalen said calmly. "She's a person, and she's under my care." The officer blinked. "You interfere with military matter, move aside." Behind him, Sierra peeked out. The moment the officers saw her, their tone changed. "There," one hissed. "She carries the beast code." Jalen looked at them sharply. "Beast code? She controls bonded animals. Illegal. Dangerous. Weapon grade." Sierra stepped forward, but Jalen stopped her with one hand. "You're not taking her," he said. The officer raised his weapon. So did Jalen. A silent standoff. Then, something strange happened. The camels, 6 of them, stood together in a line. Not because Jalen told them to. They surrounded Sierra, blocking her from view. Chests out, silent, ready. The officers hesitated. "These animals are protecting her," one muttered. The leader stepped forward and said coldly, "Last warning, human." Jalen didn't move. "You shoot me. The whole galaxy hears about it. One girl, one traitor, one warship. Is that the story your empire wants?" Silence. Then a sound from the ship. A message incoming. The officer walked back, read it, and froze. "Change of orders," he said. "Leave the girl." The others stared at him. He added, "High Council intervened. Case under review." He turned to Jalen, almost angry. "For now, she's yours, but this is not over." They left. The ship lifted, off, kicking sand in every direction. Jalen fell to his knees, heart racing. Sierra ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He hugged her tight. Later, when the dust settled, Jalen asked, "What's the beast code?" Sierra didn't answer at first. Then she said softly, "I was born with it. In my world, it is cursed or powerful. Depends on who rules. And the camels? Why do they follow you?" She looked up at him with those big shining eyes and whispered, "Because I hear their hearts." That night they sat by the fire again. No ships above, no officers near, just stars. Sierra looked at him and asked, "If they come again, will you send me away?" Jalen shook his head. "Never." She nodded, then smiled. And for the first time, she leaned against his side. Safe. Morning broke over the quiet desert. Jalen yawned and stretched, brushing sand off his shoulders. His camels were already awake, standing in a neat circle around the small camp. But something was different. They weren't just alert. They were watching Sira. She stood in the center of the circle, barefoot on the cool sand, arms gently raised, like she was reaching for something only she could feel. And the camels, they bowed one by one. Jalen froze. He had never seen this before, not in 10 years of desert trading. Are they worshipping her? He whispered. Sira turned her head and smiled softly. No, they just understand. Jalen stepped closer. Understand? What? Sira touched the neck of the lead camel. That I'm part of the herd now. That day she walked with the camels like she had always belonged. When one of them grew tired, she touched its shoulder and whispered in her strange tongue. And it kept walking, strength returning as if from nowhere. When a younger camel refused food, she pressed her forehead to its head, hummed softly, and within moments it began to eat again. They know her, Jalen thought. In a way even I can't. Later, while they rested near a cliff wall, Jalen sat beside her and asked, Where did you learn this? Sira took a while to answer. In my world, she began, we had creatures like these, not camels, bigger, wilder. But they moved like family, always together. She paused. My mother said I could hear their feelings, not words, but sadness, hunger, fear. Jalen raised his eyebrows. You feel the emotions of animals? Sira nodded. If they trust me. And the camels? She smiled again. They're loud, but gentle. That evening, as the sky turned red with sunset, Jalen saw something he would never forget. Sira stood on a rock outcrop with the camels gathered below her. She raised one hand, palm open. The lead camel raised its head and made a low, echoing sound, almost a song. One by one, the camels responded. Not loud, not wild, just a low, powerful sound that vibrated in the earth. A camel chorus. Jalen had never heard it before. No trader had. It was like the camels were calling out to something older than time, and Sira, tiny, blue-skinned, glowing in the last light of day, was their center. Afterward, Jalen asked, half joking, Are you their queen, now? Sira tilted her head. No, I'm just the one who listens, that's all they ever needed. As they prepared for sleep, Jalen couldn't stop thinking. She wasn't a soldier, she wasn't a threat. But if the galaxy saw what she could do, she could be taken, controlled, used. He thought grimly. He looked at her, curled up between two resting camels, sleeping peacefully. I won't let that happen. The next morning, a trader caravan passed them by. The traders laughed when they saw Sira riding one of the camels like she owned the desert. Cute pet you got there, one of them shouted. But then their lead camel, a stubborn beast named Crag, broke ranks and walked straight to Sira's mount, and knelt in front of her. The traders gasped. Jalen just smiled. She's no pet, he said. She's a miracle. That night, as the stars returned, Sira whispered something while petting Mina. Jalen leaned closer. What was that? Sira looked up. Her voice was soft. In my old language, I said, Thank you for letting me belong. The desert winds had changed again, but this time they carried no fear, only warmth, dust, and the quiet sound of hooves moving together in rhythm. The sun rose behind them, painting long shadows across the golden sand. At the front of the caravan rode two figures. One was a weathered human trader named Jalen. The other was a tiny alien girl with silver hair, steady hands, and a spirit stronger than steel. Her name was Sira, and this time she wasn't watching from behind a dune. She was riding beside him. A week had passed since the soldiers left, since the camels chose her, since she stopped hiding in the shadows. Now she wore a stitched desert robe Jalen had made from spare cloth. A sash held her hair back. Her skin no longer looked dry or thin. Her eyes, once heavy with fear, were now bright with purpose. And her camel Mina followed her every gesture like a loyal friend. As they approached a trade post, people stopped and stared. Children whispered, "Look, a blue-skinned girl on a camel." Some adults frowned. Some smiled. A few backed away. One old woman approached Jalen and said, "What is she?" Jalen replied without pause, "She's part of the caravan, just like me." That night, the postmaster invited Jalen to dinner, but not Sira. "She's not registered," he said, "and she's not even human." Jalen looked the man in the eyes and said, "Then neither am I." He took the food and returned to the campfire. Where Sira waited, they ate together. Under stars, again, like always. Later, Jalen asked her, "Do you miss your home? The stars?" Sira stared at the sky, silent for a long time. Then she shook her head. "No, I only missed belonging." She looked at him. "And now, I do." In the morning, Sira did something she had never done before. She handed him a hand-carved token shaped like a camel. Jalen smiled. "You made this?" Sira nodded. "With your tool, it's not perfect." "It's perfect," he said, his voice low. He tied it to his saddle. A symbol, not just of her, but of all they had been through. News of her began to spread across the outposts. People called her the Camel Whisperer. Others called her the Desert Child of Stars. But Jalen just called her my Shadow Rider. Because no matter where he went, she was always beside him. One night, under a sky full of moons, Sira asked a question. "If they come back, the soldiers, will you let them take me?" Jalen didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "I once traveled alone. I thought the desert was all I needed." He looked at her. "But now, if they try to take you..." He touched the warm stone she gave him weeks ago. "They'll have to go through all of us. Me, the camels, the entire desert." Sira smiled, and for the first time she looked fearless. As they continued their journey, Jalen noticed something strange. Other animals, foxes, desert birds, even wild lizards began to appear near their camp at night. They didn't come for food. They came for her, to listen, to rest, to be near peace. And every time, Sira greeted them like old friends. By the end of the month, traders across the region stopped calling her strange. They called her Blessing. A few even asked, "Can she bless our herd too?" But Sira always said the same thing. "I don't bless. I just listen." The final evening of their long journey arrived. The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night. Sira sat beside Jalen by the fire, humming one of her soft alien songs. He closed his eyes and smiled. "You know," he said, "the first time I saw you, you were just a pair of scared eyes behind a dune." She giggled. "You looked like a sunburned animal with a big nose." Jalen laughed. "That's fair." They sat in comfortable silence. Then Sira said something she had never said before. "Not," whispered. "Not half-hidden. Just truth. Thank you for choosing me." Jalen looked at her and said with quiet strength, "No, Sira. Thank you for saving me from being alone." And the wind carried their laughter across the stars, side by side. Always.